te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Now, Heidi Akine, tens of thousands of people could miss out on the government's cost of living bonus. The Revenue Minister's here to explain what you need to do to get the dosh. Under fives in Aotearoa are chowing down on takeaways and sugary drinks, and they're a little light on fruit and veg, according to a new study. The South Island is still stubbornly damp with road closures, slips and pop-up lakes. And speaking of water, how long does the average Kiwi spend in the shower? Well, too long. So Tauranga Council's offering free water-efficient shower heads. T's and C's apply. And a tiny bit of tech reunites fur twins after kilometres and years apart. Check us out, Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. More than 160,000 people will miss out on their cost of living payments if they don't update their bank details with Inland Revenue. The first of 3 monthly government payments set up to help with the rising costs of inflation is due out on Monday. Our political reporter Annika Smith has more.
Just a few days out from the first payment, the government is warning not everyone may get the money they're entitled to. More than 164,000 people, of the 2.1 million people eligible, need to update their bank details with Inland Revenue to get the money. Inland Revenue will pay 3 monthly instalments, each of about $116 at the start of August, September and October.
Community leaders in Dunedin are confident the worst has been and gone despite rain continuing to fall in the city. Heavy rain throughout Otago over the past 24 hours has caused widespread flooding and damage. Rising river levels also forced dozens of evacuations. Slips and flooding around Dunedin also kept emergency managers busy, with about 120 call-outs reported. Dunedin Mayor Aaron Hawkins says the local infrastructure has held up well.
We've had around 120 call-outs for slips and localised flooding. Up to 140 mils of rain has fallen since yesterday. It's still raining here, but we're confident that we're through the worst of that, and we're not anticipating any major issues overnight.
Meanwhile, Waka Kotahi says State Highway 1 from Palmerston to the Kilmog Hill north of Dunedin has reopened after being closed by floodwater. State Highway 1 from St Andrews to Glenavy and the Waitaki Bridge has also fully reopened. Drivers are warned there's still surface flooding and some damage to roads in several places. And floodwaters stubbornly remain in some parts of Christchurch and Banks Peninsula. Torrents of water have also sent slips crashing onto roads, trapping some in their homes for a second day. On Banks Peninsula, 6 key access routes are still closed by slips, including O'Kane's Bay Road. In Wellington, the main route to the airport through the suburb of Hataitai is now open to traffic in both directions after a slip this afternoon closed one lane. The slip near the intersection of Ruahine Street and Wellington Road closed the northbound lane just before 1 o'clock this afternoon. Motorists should expect delays. Health Minister Andrew Little says the fact the Director-General of Health has used his power to direct councils to fluoridate their water supplies shows the law is working as intended. Legislation was amended last year to ensure a national approach to fluoridation instead of leaving it up to local councils.
One of the reasons we introduced that power is precisely because there were too many water supplies that were not fluoridating when there are good public health reasons to do so. So their power is there now. He's exercised it. It's the right thing to do.
Andrew Little says the science clearly shows that fluoride saves children from dental decay. Adding fluoride to the water supply in these 14 local authority areas will increase the number of New Zealanders receiving fluoridated water from 51% to around 60%. New research has found New Zealand preschoolers are not eating enough fruit and vegetables, but are consuming takeaways and sugary drinks. The study, published in the Journal of Maternal and Child Nutrition, found 61% of 2-year-olds were not having enough vegetables and 45% not enough fruit. The University of Auckland researchers found some improvement in 4-year-olds, but still 48% weren't eating enough vegetables and 36% not enough fruit. Nearly all of the thousands of children in the study had been fed hot chips, battered foods and takeaways. And almost half the 2-year-olds and 42% of the 4-year-olds were having at least one sugary drink a week. It's 5:04. The Crusaders coach Scott Robertson says he's open to offers if New Zealand Rugby don't want him to lead the All Blacks. The 6-time Super Rugby winning coach, who missed out on the All Blacks job to Ian Foster in 2019, is contracted to the Crusaders to the end of next season. Robertson has told the Rugby Pod, a podcast with former Scotland international Jim Hamilton, that he wants to coach an international side at the 2027 World Cup, and while the All Blacks are his first choice, he'll happily coach another country.
It's one job, but when someone doesn't give it to you, you have to think differently. What opportunities are out there? So I'm open. New Zealand Rugby want me, great. If there's another country that I really want to go to the Rugby World Cup, I want to get to 2 or 3 and really test myself or push myself. So I'm open here.
Robertson says he wants to win a World Cup with both the All Blacks and another nation. New Zealand high jumper Hamish Kerr says his focus on the Commonwealth Games played a part in his disappointing performance at the World Championships last week. Kerr, who won a bronze medal at the World Indoor Championships earlier this year, failed to qualify for the final in Oregon. He's now in Britain preparing for the Birmingham Games and says he was probably underdone by 2 weeks at the World Champs.
It's just progressed as my body starts coming into a peak. So, yeah, I think it's kind of just business as usual. Everything's feeling really good. And, yeah, I'm just that much more confident in my jumping, 2 weeks down the line.
The Birmingham Commonwealth Games opening ceremony is on Friday morning. That's the news.
Boogie boarding in Leith.
A few people decided to ride the rapids on bodyboards. Pretty brave considering it was a very chilly day.
Problems in Paradise.
When I go on holiday, I actually just disconnect completely from email and from social media.
And a battle of the lesser-known birds vying for feathered glory.
Maybe they haven't heard of the rock wren or piwauwau, which means complaining little bird, which live up in our mountains.
Starting your day on a high. Morning reports, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
RNZ National funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday for all of the North Island except Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Also Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Periods of rain or showers with possible thunderstorms about the North Island tomorrow. Heavy falls for Eastern Bay of Plenty, Tongariro and Mount Taranaki tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine and cloudy periods, scattered showers mainly for tomorrow. For Canterbury, cloudy periods, isolated showers more widespread from Christchurch northwards for a time tomorrow morning and again in the evening. North Otago, Dunedin and Clutha, rain easing this afternoon or evening, then becoming patchy north of Dunedin City. For Central Otago, Southland and Fiordland, scattered light rain or drizzle becoming widespread in Southland tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional showers, but rain tonight and again tomorrow evening. It's 5:07.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Tonight, tens of thousands of people could miss out on the government's cost of living bonus due to be paid on Monday because IRD still doesn't have their details, how to make sure you don't miss out. But first, under fives in Aotearoa are regularly having sugary drinks as well as eating takeaways including chips and battered goodies, and they're coming up short when it comes to fruit and veg. Now that's according to new research from the University of Auckland Medical and Health Sciences. It used information from more than 6,000 children collected in a diet survey at age 2 and then again at 4 as part of the Growing Up in New Zealand study that follows participants for years. Joining us now is one of the Auckland University research team, Professor Claire Wall. Kia ora, Professor.
Kia ora, Lisa.
How bad is this?
Well, yes, it's not good. It's probably not so surprising when we compare it to other maybe less representative studies that have been conducted in New Zealand in this age group, and also the National Health Survey, which have really found similar things and also is comparable to other sorts of surveys in similar countries to New Zealand, which really shows that young children aren't meeting the recommended amounts of, fruits and vegetables and healthy foods, and are consuming more of the foods that are less healthy, and including sugary drinks.
Tell us what the benchmark is here. How much fruit and veg should a 2 to 4 year old get?
So it's approximately, the government recommends approximately 2 serves of veg and 2 serves of fruit a day.
That's not much, Claire, and we can't even do that.
No, and adults aren't much better either, to be honest with you. But yeah, within our study, when we looked at overall dietary quality, though, there were some really strong indicators that this was related to inequalities in social and demographic characteristics of the family. So it was really, quite significantly related to income.
So they just simply cannot afford it?
Yeah, I think there are real issues for families in accessing healthier foods in New Zealand, and I think this is being made worse in the current time with the increase in cost of living.
So if we break it down, 2 years and 4 year olds, how many sugary drinks a week are they getting, and what do you classify as a sugary drink? Is it orange juice or something else?
Yes, so we do classify, whole fruit juices and obviously sugar, carbonated sugar sweetened beverages, fizzy drinks, and cordials as sweetened beverages.
So in terms of what these kids were drinking, are they being fed fizzy drinks or orange juice when it comes to the sugary drink?
Yeah, a mixture of both. So, fruit juice, cordials, fruit drinks, fizzy drinks, including like sports drinks and drinks that contain quite a lot of concentrated sugars.
So once a week was basically how often they were having them.
Yeah,
what about the takeaways?
And that's just the average, so some are consuming more than that.
Yeah, and the takeaways, Claire?
Yeah, same thing as well. So that included all sorts of, different types of takeaways as well. So similar thing as well. So with children consuming more than once a week, and in some cases more than that.
So the 2-year-olds, just so I am clear on this, at the point the information was collected, 2-year-olds had takeaways in the previous month?
Yeah.
Does that not surprise you?
No, not really. When you think about our food environment and you think, being part of the wider family, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, those foods are so accessible, aren't they? And, people choose to eat them as maybe as a family, and also so the children eat them as well.
So you touched on this a little bit. Can you tell us a bit more about the trend within the trend? Like, for example, people's income, education had an influence on what they were eating.
Definitely. So the kind of lower dietary quality was very much related to inequalities in social characteristics, socioeconomic characteristics of the families, and particularly, the ability to, eat, or for the children to eat more fruit and vegetables, or to meet the recommended guidelines for fruit and vegetables.
So these kids are how old now?
Nearly 12, because the current data collection way that is going on, the children are 12 years of age.
Yeah, so what do you know about their health now? Because it's important, these first 5 years, isn't it? Really important.
Absolutely. It's a very important window for growth and development, and a very important in terms of how it can influence later health, both in, during adolescence, but also into adulthood. So currently we're collecting that information, so it's going to be really interesting from a longitudinal perspective to look at these dietary behaviours at 2 and 4.5 and how they impact on health outcomes at 12.
Appreciate your time this evening. Thank you for joining us. That is Professor Claire Wall, who's from, part of that Auckland University research team that looked at the eating habits of 2 and 4 year olds. It is 13 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Flood waters stubbornly remain in some parts of Christchurch and Banks Peninsula, turning backyards into lakes and sending rubbish bins drifting past the front fence. Torrents of water have also sent slips crashing onto roads, trapping some in their homes for a second day. Neva Chittick and cameraman Nate McKinnon have this report.
You'd be forgiven for thinking these Shirley streets were a river network. Jason Tolford's street has taken a hammering. Just down from his house, floodwaters have dumped a chunk of someone's front fence, including a mailbox, onto the footpath. The water's yet to subside, trapping his family at home.
About a week ago we had about 46 millimetres and just the intersection flooded, but this time it's all the way up to my property. Just made it in yesterday when I picked these girls up, but I can't get out. And I can't leave and I can't clean up until the water goes, really.
Across town, Hoonhay resident Maria was also ready for the floodwaters to drop, fishing out rubbish and returning bins to neighbours while she waited. She says people rubbernecking has been a major issue.
We get a lot of people coming and having a look. Disappointing when you get people driving really fast, like just videoing as they go. Most people that are respectful tend to park up where it's dry and then walk down, which is fine, but it's the ones that are driving past and flooding further up into people's gardens is not so cool.
On Banks Peninsula, 6 key access routes are still closed by slips, including O'Kane's Bay Road. Ama Jane Ryan lives in the bay and hasn't seen her 13-year-old daughter since she left on a school bus yesterday morning, and it might be another day before she sees her yet.
So they both ended up going to one house, which is up on the Summit Road, back by Pigeon Bay, but currently their house is in the middle of 3 slips. So once our road is open, we can get to the top of our road, but we actually can't get to pick the kids up.
Jason Talford says the council has not once made contact with residents or tried to pump the water away.
See that sometimes when it does flood they come down and they try and clear the drains, but it's not the problem after the earthquakes. This whole area is a bit of a hollow, so it always floods here.
His neighbour, Catherine Rutherford, is also stuck and watched 2 cars succumb to the water from her window. She says the repeated flooding was getting worse and beginning to take a toll.
It's really inconvenient. I know that they were hoping that it would fix, when they fixed the Flockton Basin, but they fixed that part, and this is the effect. Kind of like they didn't. I don't think like they've done like a full fix. That this is like the overflow.
Christchurch City Mayor Leanne Dalzell says the council has spent millions reducing the flood risk with retention basins and buying at-risk properties, but neither measure is a silver bullet.
This event was a huge event on already saturated ground, so it's going to take the councils to come to keep a close eye on the work that needs to be done. But the reality is that there are some areas that are still very low lying, and even if you clear the drains, there is nowhere for the water to drain to.
Canterbury Public Health says anyone cleaning up affected areas should wash their hands thoroughly with soap, amid reports sewerage systems have overflowed into floodwaters. People are also urged to avoid contact with beaches, rivers and floodwaters for the next 2 days.
If you were listening to that on radio, you can check out the video version of the story. We'll put it on our web page. Tens of thousands of Kiwis could miss out on the government's cost of living bonus because IRD doesn't have their bank account details. $116, the first of 3 instalments, is due on Monday for an estimated 2.1 million people. Basically, people qualify for the payments if they earn $70,000 a year or less, aren't entitled to the winter energy payment, are New Zealand tax residents and are 18 years plus. But IRD needs their bank account details. Well, joining us now is the Revenue Minister, David Parker. Kia ora, Minister.
Good afternoon.
How much of this is a result of rushing through the policy without enough planning?
Oh, nothing. No, we've always known that we don't have bank account numbers for every New Zealander. They don't have to supply their bank account numbers to us. We encourage them to do so, and we've got bank accounts for more than 90% of the people who are eligible, and we're continuing to get more every day.
So how much have you done to get the message out before today?
We've spoken of it repeatedly. We've put out media releases. Media organisations such as this interview are carrying the same message. We promote it through the accounting networks and the tax agents, through employer groups, every way in which we can.
There's mixed messaging on the IRD site, though. It says, quote, "We will pay the cost of living payment automatically if you are eligible." Do you think that's a bit confusing for people? They just think it's going to turn up.
I suppose it's possible that some people are confused. We've been pretty consistent that we're trying to reach everyone. We've got 700 staff working on these issues. 400 of them are temporary workers as we try and fill these data gaps, which of course will aids the long-term efficiency of the inland revenue system as well, because we'll have bank account numbers for even more than 90% of the people.
IRD warned you that it wasn't up to the task. Is that coming home to roost?
No, they never said that.
Well, they said that they didn't have the capacity. They didn't want to deliver the service. They said it could compromise a stretched service already, that they need 750 more full-time staff, and it would still cause significant problems and potentially slow the delivery of other services. That was in a briefing document, Minister.
No, what they said was that there would be a risk to the delivery of other services like more COVID support payments if we had another, say, super variant of COVID and we needed to run some of those income support payments that were paid out through inland revenue. They would have difficulty doing that, as well as this cost of living payment. Of course, we decided as a government that we didn't think that that was a high risk, that we thought that the cost of living payment was necessary during this 3-month period to this targeted group of 2.1 million people. We chose to go ahead with it, and I think history's proving that we took the right decision.
So if these 160,000 people ring up now and want help with IRD, there's going to be someone waiting at the phone in pretty quick, smart time to assist them? The most common way that people update their details with Inland Revenue these days is via the internet, and they go into ird.govt.nz and they access their My IRD site and they enter their own bank account details. For people that don't want to do it that way, we do have telephone services and we have many hundreds of people that are engaged with that task. So you have to be a tax resident for this payment, and IRD takes money from you. How is it that they are not able to give it back to everybody who's entitled to it?
Because there's no obligation on taxpayers to provide a bank account number with Inland Revenue Department in order to get services from Inland Revenue. It's not a precondition to dealing with your tax affairs that you have to supply a bank account number. Most people do. Increasing numbers of people will through this process, which will increase the range of people that we have those numbers for, but it's not compulsory.
So if they miss out on Monday's payment, do they get a catch-up payment?
Yes, they do. They can provide their details through to the end of March next year. If by the end of March the message hasn't got through and people haven't provided their bank details, we'll at that stage conclude that they don't want it, and we're not forcing it upon them.
Thanks for clarifying that. That's the Revenue Minister, David Parker. It is 21 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Are you entitled to that cost of living payment? Did you know you had to give your bank account details to IRD? Are you signed up and ready to go? Do let us know. The other issue tonight is young children under the age of 5 regularly having sugary drinks once a week, according to a new study, and not getting the fruit and veg they need, which is only 2 portions of fruit and 2 portions of veg a day. Cost is a big issue. Let us know your thoughts on that one. 2101 on the text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. More than 160,000 people will miss out on their cost of living payments if they don't update their bank details with Inland Revenue. The first of 3 monthly government payments set up to help with the rising costs of inflation is due out on Monday. Some suburbs in Christchurch remain underwater tonight, with residents unable to leave their homes without flooding their cars. More than 85 millimetres of rain fell on the city yesterday, causing significant surface flooding and slips in places. New research has found New Zealand preschoolers are not eating enough fruit and vegetables, but are consuming takeaways and sugary drinks. Professor Claire Wall from the Auckland University research team told Checkpoint the results are not surprising when compared to other studies. The Director General of Health has used his final media conference to announce he's directed 14 councils to fluoridate their water. Dr. Ashley Bloomfield says he's a long-time supporter of fluoridation as a safe, affordable and effective way to prevent tooth decay. And Health New Zealand's interim medical directors defending Dunedin Hospital filling shortages with students. Over the weekend, 21 student nurses filled in for 27 hospital aid shifts, a move the nursing organisation strongly criticising. But Dr. Pete Watson says those filling the aid gaps were performing non-clinical tasks. And a quick look at our traffic. Well, the main route to the airport in Wellington through the suburb of Hataite is now open to traffic. Both lanes are open, but motorists should expect delays from the backlog. And State Highway 1 from Palmerston to the Kilmog Hill north of Dunedin has reopened after being closed by floodwater. State Highway 1 from St Andrews to Glenavy and the Waitaki Bridge has also fully reopened, and drivers are warned there's still surface flooding and some damage to roads in several places. And there are 27 road closures across Dunedin, including significant flooding around Coast Road to Karatane and a significant amount of shoulder damage and potholes across other parts of the roading network. For Clutha, at least 30 roads across the Clutha district continue to be affected by surface flooding, with Milton, Waihola and the coast the worst affected areas. And finally for Oamaru, State Highway 1 between Pukeuri and Hilderthorpe is closed. A detour via 7 Mile Road is in place. It's 24 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Marama. Dunedin is still littered with road closures, surface flooding, slips and a big clean-up job. The southern cities had a major dousing. Some student flats were evacuated overnight, but tenants have been able to return today. The worst of the rain is over now, but there is no sunshine on the horizon just yet. Tess Brunton reports.
Jack Bonish lives next to the water of Leith and arrived home last night to an unusual sight.
I was literally at rugby training last night, got home at about probably 7:45, and most of the boys are pretty much packed up or ready to go. We got a knock on the door about probably 8 o'clock from the police telling us it's best to be probably safe than sorry, so we just packed up our bags as quick as we could and kind of headed up the road.
His home was one of 35 properties evacuated as a precaution last night, following concerns the river could burst its banks. He didn't think it would get too bad.
Throughout the day we kind of like, holy, this could actually kind of get worse and worse, and then there's people kind of seem to be on surfboards coming down it.
The day had yet to dawn and the rain was still heavy when he got the news he could return home, so grabbed his bag and walked home.
Some of these houses along here could be like a metre, half a metre less from the backyard, so it's getting pretty close.
By morning, the water of Leith was still murky, frothing and flowing fast. Kushla McKinney was checking out the river levels while walking to work.
I've just come through the gardens and there are certainly areas where there are small streams that have just completely gone over the paths, and I have now very wet feet because I found an unavoidable puddle that was somewhat larger than I thought it was.
And probably somewhat deeper than you'd hoped it was.
Unfortunately, yes.
She's lived in the area for the past 30 years.
I've been really impressed by how well the flood works have worked, because they've done a lot of work to widen the Leith around this area and through the university, and we've had big rains in the past, and 10, 15 years ago this would have been inundating areas of the university and along down here, so I think that's made a really big difference.
Chris works on Leith Street Central and says the surface flooding was pretty bad.
You couldn't walk along this footpath yesterday. Everyone had to walk in the middle of the road. The gutter here, the water running down, it was probably about 2 metres wide. So it was pretty horrendous, but all the drains and things were working really well, and the Leith is absolutely pumping like it is now.
He says people were nervous about the river bursting its banks.
You can see that the cars aren't parked here anymore because everyone's so frightened about it. But it is improving, and we've got our ducks back.
Further north, State Highway 1 was closed from Palmerston to Dunedin for most of the day. Waikawairi is between the two, where Sonia Billiard is a local community board member.
There's been a lot of reports from the local farmers, and I have seen a lot of their photographs that have come through, and it's pretty dire out there. The stock have all luckily been moved to high ground. We've got plenty of warning about this coming, but the damage, the flood, I mean, I've been here 20, 30 years and I haven't seen water that high in such a vast area since I've been here.
She's been at a community response hub at East Otago's event centre to support truck drivers and others cut off by flooding today. The poor weather has meant other community support hasn't been able to go ahead.
In the midst of COVID and people needing isolation care packs and our food bank and things, we're a bit stuck at the moment as well because we can't get out. I've had a lot of calls this morning, and of course we can't get out to deliver them unless they're local. we just can't get out there. It's too risky sending out volunteers in this conditions.
With flooding still impacting multiple local roads, people are being urged to check for updates before hitting the road.
And it is 28 minutes past 5. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa in INA called Giles Beckford, who joins us live from our Wellington studio. Giles, our investment confidence is weakening. Inflation, higher interest rates, wobbly markets. Yeah, what else?
It's no surprise, is it? I mean, consumer confidence is low, business confidence is low, so why not investment confidence? It goes with the current times. It's a annual survey done by the Kiwi Wealth Group, which is part of the broad Kiwi Bank group. We should note that this company is actually currently up for sale. We expect an imminent announcement on its sale in the next day or so. But the survey shows 37% of people are feeling less well off than they were a year ago. Last year it was 25%. More than half the people say that they're confident, or about half say that they're confident in the economic outlook, looking, medium term. But that's well down on 70% last year. People, by and large, are moving into term deposits. They're backing off property a wee bit. Obviously, their confidence in share markets has taken a bit of a hit. But apparently there hasn't been the panic seen as we saw when the pandemic first hit, in people swapping their KiwiSaver accounts, going from growth to conservative or from balanced to conservative. So perhaps a little bit more investor maturity out there. One of the interesting little sub-paragraphs there, just tucked away at the bottom of the survey, was a comment that people are going pretty off cryptocurrencies, so more than half say they wouldn't touch a cryptocurrency if you paid them, which I thought was interesting. And 60% of those who were surveyed, to some degree, said that if they were told that a certain company acted badly, it was racist or homophobic or sexist, that they would expect their investment fund to dump that company from their list of investments, even if it made really good profits. And of course, there's shades here of DGL, the chemicals company that we had a little earlier in the year. So, a little bit of, it's easy to say in a survey, of course, whether you go knocking on your investment manager's door and says, are you invested in there? I don't want you because, they're not the sort of people I want to invest my money in. It might be a different thing. Should note, tomorrow morning, a big survey coming out from the Financial Markets Authority on ethical investing and greenwashing. Some interesting things in there to read.
OK, new ideas to raise the price of carbon, you reckon could speed the exit of coal as a fuel. Tell us more.
It's a suggestion from the Climate Change Commission, and of course the one thing that they're impelled to do, that they're driven to do, is to cut those emissions to decarbonise the economy. The latest one is on carbon credits. Now, it's an incredibly Byzantine structure. I won't attempt to go into it to any great degree, but essentially, if you're a polluter, then you have to buy these credits to cover the cost of your emissions, or that match your emissions. And the Climate Change Commission is saying, basically, we should raise the price of them, and we should limit the number of them. So essentially raising the price of carbon, that there is the market price signal to big polluting companies. You need to change your ways. You need to adopt new technology in order to cut your emissions, because it's costing you too much. That's simple. Companies that come immediately to mind are Fonterra, who have a pile of boilers in their South Island factories dependent on coal in particular, although they are moving to electrify those operations and to cut coal. And Genesis's Huntly Power Station, and we keep hearing how when it gets really cold and they need to fire up those units because the Huntly Station just churns out power for the whole of the system. Of course, they're a big importer and user of coal, and to a lesser extent gas. So the inevitable thing of that, of course, is that if the price of carbon goes up, so does the price of the goods that we're involved in, or that they're producing, power, food or whatever, which means that we, in the end, as consumers, will end up paying for all those prices. We'll wait and see. Their suggestions only from the Climate Change Commission need to go to the government. Feedback being sought at the moment, but need to the government for final decisions on that.
Giles, let's take a stroll around the markets.
Right, quick scamper. We should say that the share market, it looked positive all day, and then it was like the runner in the 10,000 metre race. They fell over with 100 metres to go. It's ended up negative, down 31 points. It's about 0.25%. We should note a big fall today was Restaurant Brands. That's the company that runs KFC, Pizza Hut, Carlsbergers and the like. They said that their half-year profits likely to be down by nearly half. Their share price down 9% on that news. New Zealand dollar 62.3 US cents, 89.9 Australian. Should note that the Aussie inflation rate came through today. 6.1% annual rate, with expectations it will go higher in due course. Of course, all eyes on the Federal Reserve, the US Central Bank, overnight. They're expected to have another hefty rise in their benchmark rate. On the currency, 89.9 Aussie and just touching 52 British pence.
Thank you, Giles. Giles Beckford joining us there from our Wellington studio. Now, TVNZ has released its long-awaited report into the hiring of breakfast presenter Kamal Santamaria. The former Al Jazeera presenter lasted just 32 days in the job and left under a cloud of accusations of inappropriate behaviour to colleagues. Our reporter Louise Tanous joins us now. Louise, let's start off with the head of news and current affairs, Paul Jurisic, who was a key player in all of this. Can you bring us up to date with what's happened there?
Yes, so news has just come to hand that Paul Jurisic, who hired Kamal Santamaria had previously worked with him at Al Jazeera, has today placed his resignation, which has been accepted by the CEO of TVNZ. So he's resigned today, and of course they knew each other when they worked together at Al Jazeera. So when all of that was under scrutiny, he took an absence, took some leave, and he's now resigned.
Right, so that's turned permanent. In terms of the investigation, what do we know of the findings?
Yes, so the investigation that was launched has today been released, and we do have that to hand. It's just come through from TVNZ. So the report has just been released this afternoon, and it's found that Kamal Santamaria, who resigned a month ago into his role as presenter of TVNZ's breakfast program, it shows that basically the broadcaster's recruitment process is not suited to key presenter roles. So that's basically the main finding that's come out from that report this afternoon.
OK, and just take us back a bit to what happened. You touched on it. So he just disappeared from the screens.
Yes, so Santamaria resigned from the show just 1 month after taking on that role. He was off air for more than a week without explanation before his sudden departure, and was never again returning to our screens on breakfast. So he pretty much just vanished.
Thanks, Louise. That's Louise Tanous with the latest there on that TVNZ inquiry into the hiring of Kamal Santamaria. And there's a statement just to hand from TVNZ CEO Simon Power, who says they are going to immediately improve their processes. How long do you spend splashing about in the shower? Well, the average is 8 long minutes. And just think of all that precious water gurgling down the drain pipe, because Tauranga City Council it's offering free water-efficient shower heads to some households in order to cut wastewater. But there are some T's and C's. Here to explain is the council's Water Services Manager, Peter Bars. Kia ora, Peter.
Kia ora, Lisa.
So what's the deal with these posh shower heads? How can locals get themselves one?
Well, they can apply online through our link on our TCC website. The criteria are all laid out there. But the key thing is most people, if they've got an old, inefficient shower head, they're the most eligible for the swap out.
So an 8-minute shower, how much water goes down the gurgler during that time?
Well, we're looking at trying to cut that in half by these more efficient shower heads, and on an 8-hour shower, that would save you 50 litres.
8-minute shower, yeah, save you that, 50 litres. I mean, we're wondering, do you still get good pressure with this shower head?
Well, that's part of the reason why we're having this trial, is to allow people to test it out and see that it doesn't impact negatively on their shower experience. and we're wanting to get feedback from the trial to see how easy it is for people to make that transition.
So you're giving away 150, right? Will you give away more if it's a success?
Well, at this stage, we're just trying to get an understanding of it. So if it really proves very successful, we'll take that back to council and see whether we can implement more.
Do people have to install the shower head themselves, or as part of the deal that you send someone to do that?
Look, at this stage, we've encouraged people just to do it themselves. It's really a fairly simple thing of screwing out the old one and screwing in the new one in the existing fitting. So it should be a fairly straightforward job, but if needs be, I'm sure we can assist.
How many people do you reckon, how many households have inefficient shower heads that are wasting water?
I would suggest, just looking at the demographics of the city, there's still a lot of old houses that probably haven't swapped to efficient ones. But even if we got 20% of the city, that would be a huge saving for us. I was just considering even 1,000 houses, the saving from that would be able to provide water for another 300 houses without adding any further demand on the city's water supply.
Peter, you mentioned old properties, right? Lots of people have old properties. What about new builds? In your district, do you specify in new builds that people must have more efficient shower heads?
We don't specify it, but I believe in general that is the case where the shower appliances are a lot more efficient than the older ones that were historically used.
Any suggestion you're going to make it compulsory for people to use these shower heads if they are building new homes or redoing bathrooms?
Look, again, it's a conversation we could have with developers going forward. It's something that we would encourage in the first instance. I think we would like to educate the community to make sure that they have a vested interest to demanding it rather than us enforcing it.
Hey, just curious, how much does one of these shower heads cost? If you weren't giving them away for free, how much are they?
The retail price is about $57.
Righty-ho. Hey, 8 minutes. Do you reckon that's a long shower?
You could certainly reduce your shower time. We have a little shower timer that clocks in at 4 minutes, and that's what we try and aim for. And that would, again, cut your water use in half.
Are you in and out in about 3 seconds, are you, in the shower, Peter, given that, you're the water guy?
I try and be as efficient as I can.
Appreciate your time, Peter. That's Peter Bowers, who's the Tauranga City Council's Water Services Manager there. They're trialling new, more efficient shower heads. It is 19 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro. I'm keen to hear from you on that one, the shower heads. So Tauranga are trialling these more efficient shower heads to reduce the water that you go through. On average, we spend about 8 minutes in the shower, us Kiwis. Should it be made compulsory so that we save more water, or is it personal choice? Let us know, 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's head to the headlines now with Marama.
Thank you, Lisa. Tens of thousands of Kiwis could miss out on the government's cost of living bonus because IRD doesn't have their bank account details. But the Revenue Minister, David Parker, told Checkpoint the government has repeatedly pushed the message that people need to provide their details in order to get the payment. Dentists say the Director General of Health's directive to councils to fluoridate their water is a game changer. A Dental Association spokesperson, Dr. Rob Beagleholt, says fluoridation will ease unnecessary pain and suffering across the country because it's proven to reduce tooth decay by 40%. Community leaders in Dunedin are confident the worst has been and gone, despite rain continuing to fall in the city. Heavy rain throughout Otago over the past 24 hours has caused widespread flooding and damage, but Dunedin Mayor Aaron Hawkins says the local infrastructure has held up well. TVNZ's Head of News and Current Affairs, Paul Jurisic, has resigned after a review into the hiring of presenter Kamau Santamaria. TVNZ released its long-awaited report on Wednesday afternoon. The former Al Jazeera presenter lasted just 32 days in the job and left under a cloud of accusations of inappropriate behaviour to colleagues. Having a look at our traffic, and there's been a lot of road closures across Aotearoa, Lisa, throughout the day. But the one to the main route to the airport in Wellington through the suburb of Hataitai is now open on both lanes. Motorists should still expect some delays from the backlog. Now, let's look around Te Waipounamu. State Highway 1 from Palmerston to the Kilmore Hill north of Dunedin has reopened after being closed by floodwater. State Highway 1 from St Andrews to Glenavy and the Waitaki Bridge has also fully reopened. Drivers are warned there's still surface flooding and some damage to roads in several places. In Oamaru, State Highway 1 between Pukeuri and Hilderthorpe is closed. A detour via 7 Mile Road is in place. Now around Dunedin, 27 road closures, can you believe it, are happening, including significant flooding around Coast Road to Karatane and a significant amount of shoulder damage. For Clutha, at least 30 roads across the Clutha district continue to be affected by surface flooding, with Milton, Waihola and the coast the worst affected areas. It's 5:44.
Ngā mihi eho, the Director General of Health has used his final media conference to announce he's directed 14 councils to fluoridate their water. Dr Ashley Bloomfield says he's a long-time supporter of fluoridation as a safe, affordable and effective way to prevent tooth decay. Lauren Crimp reports.
Councils across Aotearoa have had Dr Ashley Bloomfield on the phone during his last week on the job. His final tick on the to-do list? To get 14 of them moving on fluoridating water. Legislation was amended last year to ensure a national approach to fluoridation instead of leaving it up to councils. Today is the first time this power has been used. Dr Bloomfield says community water fluoridation benefits everyone.
I've actually been a long-time champion of fluoridation. It's an incredibly effective, one of the most cost-effective public health interventions. And one of the things about it is it's a great way to address inequities in outcomes, and particularly amongst children.
Dr Bloomfield says fluoridation should happen across the country as soon as possible, and councils shouldn't need to wait for a directive. The New Zealand Dental Association is calling the move a game changer. Spokesperson Dr Rob Beaglehole says fluoridation will ease unnecessary pain and suffering across the country because it is proven to reduce tooth decay by 40%.
It's going to make a huge difference to children, Maori, Pacifica and deprived members of society living in those areas that will now be drinking fluoridated water.
Councils told to fluoridate can apply for cash from an $11.3 million fund for capital projects. They've got between 6 months and 3 years to get the job done. Dr Bloomfield says he got mixed levels of enthusiasm from mayors on the other end of the phone. Waitaki District Council has until the end of June 2024 to fluoridate the Oamaru supply, which supplies more than 15,000 people. Mayor Gary Kircher says a lot of councils put fluoridation in the too hard basket in the past. He says whenever it came up, very vocal anti-fluoride groups tended to dominate the community discussion.
It became very political, and for an actual health situation, a health issue, the politics really didn't help, and sometimes the best decisions weren't made.
Gary Kircher says fluoridation is going to have great flow-on effects on his community's health. We asked Health Minister Andrew Little what he thought of the fact that 14 councils had to be effectively ordered to fluoridate.
One of the reasons we introduced that power is precisely because there were too many water supplies that were not fluoridating when there are good public health reasons to do so. So their power is there now, he's exercised it, it's the right thing to do.
While Dr Bloomfield has got the ball rolling, he won't see the country's fluoridation through as he signs off from his post on Friday. Dr Bloomfield says the country is in good hands.
I feel honoured to have led the Ministry of Health at this time, and I am wholly confident in the people
Adding fluoride to the water supply in these 14 local authority areas will increase the number of New Zealanders receiving fluoridated water from 51% to around 60%. For those councils still dragging their feet on fluoridation, it's likely the incoming Director General of Health will give further directions to fluoridate this year.
He's probably the only public servant who's become a household name, and as you heard there, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield signed off at his final media conference today. He was beamed into houses up and down the country for the 1 p.m. updates during the height of the COVID outbreak, and his face was then plastered on tea towels, tote bags and the big screen at music events. And today was his 307th media conference about COVID. And as he left the media conference this afternoon, he was given a standing ovation by dozens of colleagues at the Ministry of Health. The DG of Health says he feels honoured to have led the ministry through the pandemic and says he's leaving the sector in good hands. It is 12 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. There's pressure on our hospitals and there's no easy fix to appease everyone. Dunedin Hospital used 21 student nurses to fill 27 hospital age shifts over the weekend. The move's been strongly criticised by the nurses' organisation, who instead say the families of patients should be brought in to help. Our reporter Jake McKee filed this report.
It was just before 3 p.m. on Friday when students of the Otago Polytechnic Nursing School received an email urgently asking for their help. The request went to all nursing students, third years nearing the end of their studies, first years only 6 months in. They had little idea about what they were being asked to do, but each shift came with a $200 supermarket voucher. One nursing student who was unable to help spoke to RNZ anonymously and thinks their peers deserve more. Their words have been revoiced.
I don't think a $200 countdown voucher equates to the work, you know? You don't get the penal rates that you get on the weekends.
Paying students with vouchers is no way to acknowledge a crisis, they said. The student worried about a lack of hospital experience first-year students would have had.
I did kind of wonder if that was appropriate because they're not oriented to the hospital and they're not kind of aware of everything. They're only 6 months into their degree.
Nurses Organisation President Anne Daniels says bringing in students was an unfortunate decision and a major health and safety risk.
You know, I have to give them credit. They stood up because they wanted to help, but they didn't know what they were walking into. And people who know better should have made a different decision.
She says families should have been brought in to look after their loved ones instead, but that idea doesn't sit well with Auckland woman Tiff McLeod, whose 14-year-old daughter Eva has been in and out of hospital her entire life. Tiff McLeod says her heart goes out to nurses, but asking families to plug in the gaps is going to put them under more pressure too.
You'd be facing lots of burnout and exhaustion because you're already on this high stress, constantly caring for them, even in an emergency situation.
She doesn't know what the right fix is, but says relying on students and families is not it.
If something goes wrong, they have to carry that responsibility and that load, and that's a huge thing to have to carry and a huge burden to have.
Te Whatu Order Health New Zealand's Dr. Pete Watson highlighted that those filling the aid gaps are performing non-clinical tasks.
I just want to reassure everybody that where this is happening, it's under the direction and delegation of registered nurses. So this has been well supported and supervised where this is occurring.
A Te Whatu Order Southern spokesperson says families are regularly asked to support whānau, but hospitals can't ask them to provide a 24/7 watch of patients. The organisation says it doesn't plan to offer vouchers again, and it's working to get some of the students onto casual contracts.
A tiny bit of tech has delivered a big result for a Palmerston North family, reuniting twins 3.5 years after one of them went missing. Moss the Moggy was adopted with his brother Roy from the SPCA in Hamilton and moved with them to Palmerston North, but shortly afterwards he went missing without a trace, despite all efforts to track him down. That's until 3.5 years later when Moss's mum, Melanie Fallows, got a phone call from about 130 kilometres away. It was the SPCA, the Hastings branch.
couldn't believe it. It was my mother-in-law. They contacted her. She was the secondary contact at on the microchip. And so they contacted her and she called me and said, "You're not going to believe it. I've just had a phone call and they found your cat." I was, "What? That can't be. It's been so long." And yeah, to find him all the way in Hastings, I mean, amazing.
What's your theory? I mean, he's obviously adventurous, but that adventurous?
I don't know. He's such a friendly cat. I mean, we don't know if maybe somebody picked him up or he wandered to a neighbouring house and got in somebody's car. Who knows? We have no clue. He can't tell us. So, yeah, if only they could tell us, where they've been.
Tell us a little bit of the backstory, because you adopted him and you moved cities and took him with you. So what happened?
Yes, we adopted him and his brother. He has a brother, they look exactly the same, from the SPCA. We moved, we're in our house for 6 months, and that's when, after the 6 months, that he just vanished. And we looked everywhere, we put up posters, we asked everyone in our neighbourhood, at our schools, everything like that, and nobody had seen him. So lo and behold, it's 3.5 years and he's found a long way away.
And when you brought him home, what happened?
Well, we put the cage down, we were just patting him, and he walked around for a couple of minutes, and then he went straight up the stairs to my son's bedroom where he used to sleep and just plonked himself on the bed and made himself quite comfortable. So it was like as if he'd never left. He just, yeah.
He's got a bit of swagger, it sounds
He does,
like.
yes, he does.
And did you drive him home all the way from Hastings to Palmy North?
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Well, it was with all the roadworks. It was a very long trip there and back, but he was amazing. I mean, he's just such a cool cat. He just loves cuddles and pats. He's just settling in again, and it's lovely to have him home.
Did his twin brother recognise him? Did they know each other?
Yeah, they did. There's a few squabbles at the food bowls now because they're not used to being fed, together. But I think they did. They put their noses together for a minute, and I think they might have.
I don't want to be disrespectful, but I understand Moss came back a little on the chubby side. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah, he's over 5 kilos, so he's a big boy. He was bigger than his brother, always, but yeah, he's considerably bigger. So whether or not he's just been feeding himself or somebody else has been feeding him, I don't know. It's all a mystery. But thank you to the people that handed him in, that found him on their rural property, and
Isn't the microchip an amazing little tiny piece of technology?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it is. Yeah.
Without it, you would never have got him back.
No, we wouldn't have. It's, it's just, you don't realise how much you really do miss them until, you see them and you're, oh my goodness, where have you been? I've missed you so much. I drove all the way up there just thinking, gosh, what if there's been some kind of mistake or something? I hope not, because you just don't know. And you just can't believe that it's been that long and that you're really going to get your other family member back.
Now, the SPCA obviously played a key role in reuniting Moss with his family, and they say it would have been a completely different story if he hadn't been microchipped. All cats from the SPCA are, and they are encouraging owners to do the same. Banks Avenue primary students in Christchurch have had to put up with a broken school, broken paths, faulty windows, cold classrooms and scruffy carpet. After 10 years of making it work, today they've finally moved into a shiny new digs. Rachel Graham went to their official opening.
Banks Avenue School has been through the ringer since the quakes in 2010 and 2011. First told they were to close, then changed to a rebuild, which was supposed to be finished by 2017. 5 years on, they're finally there. And today the children had their first day at the new school. Year 6 student Hazel Bourne has some pretty simple hopes for her new school.
Probably that there's no graffiti on the side of the buildings and the classrooms are warmer. And we have new playgrounds with snippets of wood sticking up so they can't trip us over. We just have clean classrooms.
Year 6 student Oscar Black is also excited to get into the new buildings.
Probably the warmer classrooms and probably a bigger site that's just as well, because we have so many kids. It was all cramped up in the old site.
Principal Tony Burnside says the students have put up with a lot over the last few years.
You walk outside and you trip over the concrete or the tree roots. The windows, you have the wind whistling through even when they're not open. There are holes in carpet and there are patches everywhere. We've tried to patch. Heating breaks down a different class will go every year, and because we haven't invested any money in it for 10 years. So the infrastructure of the school that was damaged anyway has just been way, way worse.
She says the students, however, didn't know anything else, so they've just got on and dealt with the situation they were facing. Kurt Mackay is the school board chair, as well as a parent to 4 children who are or were at the school. He's been on the board since 2014 and says it's been a hard slog, and today will be a mix of happiness and relief.
What we're doing here will last the next 50 odd years, and so even though there's a lot of that extra work, it's worth hauling yourself across the line to do that.
Banks Avenue School will now be known as Pariawa Banks Avenue School at its new site, which is about a 10-minute walk from the old site and further away from the Avon River and Dudley Stream. The new site was home to Shirley Boys High School, which was also earthquake damaged and rebuilt in North Brighton. Tony Burnside says they have been reassured that while a school for 1,200 students couldn't be rebuilt on the site, the land is fine for a school only half that size.
Because many parts of the land still are compromised. And if you look out on our field, that is underwater at the moment because it's not draining away. So I don't think you could have built out on that part out there. So, and that's been a big part of our delays.
Today, the school needed to make use of portaloos on site due to the heavy rain yesterday causing problems with the drains. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, officially opened the school today, including unveiling a plaque with the help of the oldest and youngest school pupils. He noted that many of the students at the school weren't even born when Christchurch was hit by the earthquakes, and that the Christchurch School Rebuild program is almost finished.
On shower durations, Richard says, I thought my 5-minute shower was long.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. TVNZ's Head of News and Current Affairs, Paul Jurisic, has resigned after a review into the hiring of presenter Kamau Santamaria. The broadcaster has released its independent review into its recruitment policies and practices. The former Al Jazeera presenter lasted just 32 days in the job and left under a cloud of accusations of inappropriate behaviour against colleagues. Television New Zealand Chief Executive Simon Power says the review by senior employment lawyer Margaret Robbins found the company's recruitment policy failed to provide a suitable process for hiring key presenters. He says work is underway to improve recruitment at TVNZ. Tens of thousands of people could miss out on the government's cost of living bonus because Inland Revenue doesn't have their bank account details. The first instalment of $116 is due on Monday, but some have been caught off guard by the requirement. But Revenue Minister David Parker has told Checkpoint people who miss out on next week's payment can make it up later.
They can provide their details through to the end of March next year. If by the end of March the message hasn't got through and people haven't provided their bank details, we'll at that stage conclude that they don't want it, and we're not forcing it upon them.
David Parker insists the IRD has enough staff to handle an influx of people adding their bank details. Supplies of jib have been boosted with 4 alternative plasterboard products now able to be used as a substitute. The Ministry of Building, Innovation and Employment started looking at how to free up supply during a nationwide shortage of the popular building product. 12 importers of plasterboard, 4 of them new, have 100 containers on their way to New Zealand. Elephant Board, USG Boral, Pro Rock and Save Board now meet building code requirements and have been approved for sale. Kāinga Ora will also use a different product for its retrofit program over the next 12 months, about 400 houses worth, that will free up more domestic supply. The Commerce Commission is due to report its draft study next week into competition in New Zealand's residential building supplies markets. Some suburbs in Christchurch remain underwater tonight, with residents unable to leave home without flooding their cars. More than 85 millimetres of rain fell on the city yesterday, causing significant surface flooding and slips. Water is still lapping up driveways in Hoonhay's Green Park Street. Resident Maria has been returning floating bins to her neighbours and says there's no sign of the water receding.
It's the river and it's the tides, and so I don't know. Like, we've been down and had a look to see if there's blockages. Like, my partner went round with a rake last week and there's nowhere seems to be blocked, so I'm not actually sure why it's not going away at the moment.
Maria says it's not uncommon for her street to flood, but it normally subsides quickly. Clutha District Council fears the Tokomairero River may flood State Highway 1 south of Milton at some stage tonight. It warns motorists to travel early while the road remains open or to delay travel. More than 30 roads around the district are affected by surface flooding. Dentists say the Director General of Health's directive to councils to fluoridate their water is a game changer. In his final media conference today, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield announced he's ordered 14 councils to fluoridate, the first time he's used this power granted to him by a law change last year. A Dental Association spokesperson, Dr. Rob Beaglehole, says fluoridation will ease unnecessary pain and suffering across the country because it's proven to reduce tooth decay by 40%.
It's going to make a huge difference to children, Maori, Pacifica and deprived members of society living in those areas that will now be drinking fluoridated water.
Dr. Beaglehole says other councils not yet fluoridating should prepare now, as he expects they'll receive the same direction soon. The mother of a teenager who needs frequent hospitalisation says asking families to care for their sick loved ones on the ward will put them at risk of burnout too. The nurses' organisation is horrified that student nurses have been brought in to plug holes in the roster at Dunedin Hospital, saying families should have been brought in to look after their loved ones instead. But Tiff McLeod from Auckland says she tries to be by her daughter's side as much as possible when she's in hospital.
But there's definitely times when I've had to leave her or am completely exhausted and need to leave her, and she has needed to have a watch or a healthcare assistant there. And my concern would be that you'd be facing lots of burnout and exhaustion because you're already on this high stress, constantly caring for them, even in an emergency situation.
Tiff McLeod says some help is better than no help. The Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has ordered relief teams to the northern province of Abra, where a powerful earthquake has damaged buildings and triggered landslides. A spokesperson for the recently sworn-in leader says he'll visit the affected areas. The BBC's Will Leonardo reports.
The 7.1 magnitude earthquake struck the northern Philippine island of Luzon after 8 in the morning, causing extensive damage. A hospital has been evacuated after it partially collapsed. There were reports of large cracks appearing in buildings and roads. There's little word yet on casualties. Local officials have spoken of repeated aftershocks and said they were trying to reach residents. The shallow quake was also felt strongly 300 kilometres to the south in the Philippine capital, Manila. Workers, including at the country's Senate building, were seen evacuating their offices. The city's metro was stopped during rush hour for safety.
The time is 6 minutes past 6. Aspiring All Blacks coach Scott Robertson is open to test roles outside of New Zealand and hopes to become the first coach to win the World Cup with 2 different nations. Robertson was overlooked for the All Blacks job in favour of the now under fire Ian Foster after the 2019 World Cup. Having guided the Crusaders to 6 championships in 6 years, Robertson told the Rugby Pod, a podcast hosted by ex-Scotland international Jim Hamilton, he's not interested in another Super Rugby level role when his contract with the Crusaders at the end of next season.
I want to win a Rugby World Cup, but I want to win it with 2 different countries. I think that would transcend. I think it would be great to win a Rugby World Cup with your own country, which I want to do. That's the foremost thing, but I'd love to do it with another country. Not sure what order it is. I'm not sure how that plays out. Those decisions are not mine.
Robertson says he wants to be known as a coach that players want to play for. Recent history is preventing any Black Caps complacency ahead of the opening T20 Cricket International against Scotland. The 2 teams meet in the first of 3 matches in Edinburgh in the early hours of tomorrow morning. Black Caps captain for the series, Mitchell Santner, says they're expecting a big challenge after being pushed by the Scots at the T20 World Cup last year.
Quite close game in the end. Obviously, you come to a ground like this, it's slightly smaller, so your plans have to change slightly, but we know they're a good side and we have to be on.
And the Breakers have signed power forward and former Utah Jazz NBA player Jarrell Brantley for the upcoming Australian NBL season. That's the news.
How does it feel to be part of this project?
Just amazing. Really exciting, and it's really wonderful as a Māori Land Trust to be part of something that's quite new. They're out here having the main course, this beautiful grass that we grow, and then go in the shed and have all their dessert.
The Onuku Māori Lands Trust and its $3.5 million investment into sheep milking. Country Life, Friday night at 9 and Saturday morning at 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National, funded through New Zealand On Air. Let's look at the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. Well, for all of the North Island except Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, also Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Periods of rain or showers with possible thunderstorms about the North Island tomorrow. Heavy falls for Eastern Bay of Plenty, Tongariro and Mount Taranaki tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine and cloudy periods with scattered showers mainly for tomorrow. Canterbury, cloudy periods, isolated showers. More widespread from Christchurch northwards for a time tomorrow morning and again in the evening. North Otago, Dunedin and Clutha. Rain easing this evening, then becoming patchy north of Dunedin City. Central Otago, Southland and Fiordland. Scattered light rain or drizzle becoming widespread in Southland tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional showers but rain tonight and again tomorrow evening. RNZ National, it's 9 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Abuse and neglect of disabled people locked away in institutions in Ukraine has been exposed by a BBC investigation. The country is at war, but the problem predates Russia's invasion. Human rights groups say Ukraine shouldn't be allowed to join the EU until it abolishes a care system which is failing the most vulnerable. The BBC's Dan Johnson has this report.
Far from the front line.
I've been to hundreds of institutions and they get a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach.
International investigators Eric and Helena are uncovering Ukraine's most shameful secret. The abuse and neglect of disabled people. Look into these cots and you see the smothered potential and stunted growth of lives stolen by a state system that is stuck in the past. These are not children. They're young men in their 20s or 30s.
What you have here is failure to thrive, because this is this person's life. Inside this crib, this is all of the stimulation he has. This person is dying a slow death in this bed.
Here's an evacuee from the fighting in the east, but his suffering long predates the invasion.
Oh my God, this is his ribs. This is his ribs hanging out. To have this kind of lack of development, that is a product of many years of neglect. He's skin and bones.
These places are relics of the Soviet era, long since left behind by other countries. But the director here says Ukraine still needs them.
This is the situation as it is. I'm sure that for these children, instead of being in dysfunctional families where they could be uncared for, without food, here we have all the essentials. We don't need material support, but we definitely need advice from doctors or other organizations, because I understand nothing is ideal.
This is Vasil, a teenager, wearing a nappy and tied to a bench. And he's not the only one who's been restrained and left. There are signs. The staff can't cope. They went from 10 residents to 52 overnight, taking in those escaping the war. Like Victor, having physiotherapy to unravel his gnarled limbs. Rigid from years of institutional neglect. It's another painful illustration of a system that can seem rough and uncaring. The reality for generations of young Ukrainians, their parents, the staff, everyone persuaded these institutions are where disabled people belong.
The European Union has agreed to reduce its use of natural gas in case Russia decides to cut off supplies completely. EU leaders agreed to lower demand by 15% starting next week. There's a catch though, the cuts are voluntary. CNN's Kay Sebastian reports.
It was yet another test for European unity. The EU agreeing to work together to avoid winter natural gas shortages and defend themselves against what Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky calls Russia's overt gas war on Europe.
The negotiations were not easy.
Not easy, but increasingly urgent. Russia tightened the screws again Monday, announcing the gas flowing through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline would be cut in half from Wednesday, taking what was Europe's biggest gas supply route from Russia to just 20% capacity.
There is no technical reason to do so. This is a politically motivated step.
Russia denies this. Once a symbol of Russia-EU integration, Gazprom had already slashed supplies through the Nord Stream pipeline in June, blaming delays in the return of a turbine being repaired in Canada because of sanctions. Now it says another turbine needs repairs.
It will trigger inflation, it will throw countries into recession. Germany has already announced stage 2 of its 3 stages in terms of gas rationing. It will be very precarious situation economically.
Energy consultancy Wood Mackenzie says with Nord Stream pumping at 20%, the EU should still be able to fill its gas storage to 75 to 80% ahead of winter, which should leave a small amount left over in the spring. That is, unless it's an unusually cold winter. In the end, getting this deal done meant compromising. If the EU does have to trigger an alert and make the voluntary cuts mandatory, some countries will be exempted or be given lower targets.
Firstly, there is a derogation for Baltic states whose electricity system is synchronized with Russia. A derogation for islands, member states who are filling their gas storages for critical industries, states with limited interconnections, temporary increased consumption of gas in electricity production.
Cracks in the deal are already appearing, Hungary calling the agreement completely unacceptable. And even with these measures, Europe is now at the mercy of Mother Nature, praying for a mild winter.
It is 6:15. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As Australia tries to stop the entry of foot and mouth disease, the country's live cattle exporters are already taking a hit. Rapid spread of the disease in Indonesia has prompted feedlots there to halt or reduce imports from Australia. Indonesia is Australia's most lucrative market for live cattle, earning around $500 million a year. But that's now in jeopardy. The ABC's Anne Barker reports.
In good times, feedlots like this one import hundreds of thousands of live cattle every year from Australia. The cattle are sold and slaughtered in feedlots across Indonesia and help feed a population of 270 million people. The pandemic has already hit the industry hard because widespread job losses from COVID have meant many families have less money to spend on meat. Now, feedlot owners are facing another threat, with foot and mouth disease spreading across the country.
Saya kan sebagai Direktur Eksekutif.
Johnny Liano from Indonesia's Cattle Industry Association says consumers are fearful of eating contaminated meat and catching the disease themselves, even though the risk of that is exceedingly rare. But the much higher risk of cattle being infected has led feedlot owners to drastically reduce or even halt their imports of live cattle altogether.
Beberapa anggota
I received reports from our members. Some have cancelled their import contracts. Some no longer order cattle, and the number is quite high. In percentage, it's about 50% down from the imports we have in normal times, he says. Even one infected animal would be enough to shut an entire feedlot, causing a massive loss to the business. That hasn't happened yet, but owners are now too fearful to import cattle until their herds are fully immunised. Australia has already offered 1 million vaccines to help Indonesia immunise cattle, but they're not expected to arrive till next month. And until vaccinations kick in, Australian livestock exporters face weeks, if not months, of reduced demand.
Once you lose demand, the prices do reduce.
I think what we are seeing is a bit of a softening in the cattle price.
Mark Harvey-Sutton is CEO of Australia's Live Export Council.
This is a logistical challenge in terms of making sure that feedlotters can vaccinate cattle and those sort of things. So it's not because there's a lack of demand. It's because it's getting the cattle and the risk, all those sort of things, is presenting challenges, which is seeing at lower volumes at the moment.
Indonesia has so far vaccinated almost 700,000 head of cattle, but with a national herd around 18 million, there's a long way to go. And it's small farmers who are given priority for vaccines, meaning feedlot owners have much longer to wait. And that in turn means Australian exporters will have to tough it out indefinitely or find new markets altogether.
The US Attorney General is not ruling out charging Donald Trump over the January 6th insurrection on Capitol Hill. A US congressional committee probing the January 6, 2021 assault on the US Capitol has sought to build a case that then-President Donald Trump behaved illegally when he tried to overturn his 2020 electoral defeat. But what charges could prosecutors bring against Trump? They could include conspiracy to defraud the United States and seditious conspiracy. CNN's Ryan Nobles explains.
It's the first sign the Justice Department is reaching inside the Trump White House and the most aggressive public step taken by prosecutors looking at January 6th.
Obviously, we have two different interests. Ours is to get to the bottom of what happened, put out recommendations. The Department of Justice is to look at any possible criminality. If they are moving forward on looking at this stuff, I think that's very positive for the country.
Two high-profile members of the Trump White House, Mark Short and Greg Jacob, both reportedly appearing in front of a federal grand jury, testifying as part of a criminal investigation that has expanded to examine attempts to prevent the certification of the 2020 election.
I can confirm that I did receive a subpoena for the federal grand jury, and I complied with that subpoena, but under advice of counsel, I really can't say much more than that.
Short was Mike Pence's chief of staff, Jacob his chief counsel. Both were key witnesses to the House January 6 Select Committee, with Jacob testifying publicly about the pressure campaign on Pence in the build-up to the Capitol riot.
Mr. Eastman was opining that there were two legally viable arguments as to authorities that the vice president could exercise 2 days later on January 6th.
The expansion of the DOJ probe from cabinet and campaign, while at the same time taking a hard look at the role of Secret Service and their missing text messages.
I don't really buy that for 1 minute. For one thing, isn't it a little odd that all of the texts would vanish for January 6th and January 5th? You know, of all the days, what an odd coincidence that is.
That probe is now complicated by new questions raised about the Homeland Security Inspector General, who first raised concerns about the deleted texts. The House Oversight and Homeland Security Committees sending Joseph Kufari a letter asking him to recuse himself into any investigation related to the Secret Service and their text messages. We are writing to express our grave concerns with Inspector General Kufari's failure to promptly notify Congress of crucial information while conducting an investigation of the Secret Service. The letter was written by Oversight Chair Carolyn Maloney and Homeland Security Chair Benny Thompson, who also chairs the January 6th committee.
As the US basketball player Brittany Griner prepares to give evidence in her trial for possession of cannabis in Moscow, another lesser-known American, Mark Fogel, starts a prison sentence in Russia for the same offence. Fogel has been held by a Russian court for over a year and has just been sentenced to 14 years in jail. His family says he used medical cannabis to treat chronic back pain. CNN's Kylie Atwood reports on the American teacher's case as the Russia-US relationship gets icier by the day.
An American teacher heading back to Moscow last August for his 10th year teaching the children of U.S. diplomats. Airport personnel going through his bags, just minutes before he was detained for carrying cannabis into the country. His sister says no one in his family has heard his voice since. All they have are letters written in Russian.
He says what he wants in English. Someone translates for him, one of his cellmates. And depending on how good their English is how accurate of a picture we get of what is happening. It's very convoluted, and it's incredibly worrisome because we can't really there is no honest conversation. Everything goes through the censors. It's harrowing.
Fogel was convicted of smuggling drugs into Russia and last month sentenced to 14 years in prison in a high-security penal colony. His family and lawyers have said he was carrying cannabis for medical reasons, treating chronic back pain.
He made a terrible mistake by taking medical marijuana into Russia, but 14 years in a hard labor camp is essentially a death sentence for him. He's 61 years old and he has a very long history of spinal injury.
The circumstances of his detention have some similarities to the arrest of WNBA star Brittany Griner. But Griner was declared wrongfully detained by the State Department less than 3 months after her arrest. Fogel's family is still waiting.
He is wrongfully detained. There's no question about it. This is an outrageous sentence.
As we learn more about the circumstances of detention, the charges, fair trial guarantees, due process or lack thereof, we are always weighing those developments against the criteria to determine whether an American is wrongfully held or not.
While Fogel was carrying about 20 grams of cannabis, much more than Griner, his American lawyer says that his sentence cannot be explained without there being a political motive.
This is a person who has served the American diplomatic community in schools all over the world for well over the majority of his career. I need my president and my first lady to stand up for him. He needs to come home.
Israel's coastline has some unwanted tourists this summer, with swarms of jellyfish in the water, stinging swimmers, as well as clogging fishing nets and desalination plants. It's estimated to be costing the tourism industry $10 million in lost revenue. CNN's Hadas Gold has the details.
White specks dot the turquoise blue waters off the coast of Israel. Each one a translucent, pulsating jellyfish. Hundreds of millions of them. Eye-catching but venomous, swarming the Mediterranean Sea. While the region has always had a jellyfish season in the warm summer months, this year rising water temperatures have caused an explosion in numbers.
Normally, these beaches would be packed full of locals and tourists, but the lifeguards here tell me that the crowds are staying away because of the jellyfish.
I am afraid because it's very dangerous. One of my sons was stung the other day.
But mostly they're moving with currents.
Dr. Bella Galil is one of Israel's top jellyfish experts. She says this species is not native to the Mediterranean, but in recent years entered from the Red Sea through the Suez Canal. As the canal has expanded and waters continue to warm as part of climate change, she warns they could spread even further.
So since the sea kept warming, it spread with the warming sea, and it now reaches Tunisia, Malta and Sicily. And with the expected continued warming, it may reach European coast.
Their sting is more painful than that from any jellyfish native to the Mediterranean, Galil says, and in some cases can cause people to go into anaphylactic shock and coma. But it's not just the harm they can do to beachgoers that is a cause for concern.
The most important is having a swarm, a juggernaut of very efficient predators going through the sea and eating up the local biota, that other species are at a loss.
Galil says some short-term solutions, like creating saltwater barriers in the Suez Canal, could help stem the numbers. And within a week, this current wave is expected to subside. But as climate change continues to push temperatures upwards, these hauntingly beautiful, yet dangerous creatures will keep coming.
And finally tonight, an orchestra in the United States may not have a string section, but it definitely has one that needs ribbon. The Boston musicians flagged traditional instruments in favour of a writing tool that gives them a distinctive sound. CNN's Levin Reed reports.
We call them instruments, some people call them office machines, some people call them sculpture.
So let's call this a concert with a business office feel.
At the staff meeting.
The Boston Typewriter Orchestra uses old-style typewriters to give them their rhythmic tone.
It's got a limited range of sound, so you really have to work at what you're trying to extract out of it.
So how does a group like this even get started?
We came together in the beginning as a bunch of weirdos that kind of like to bang on typewriters and that were, for one reason or the other, obsessed about making noises on typewriters.
And once we realized, we're trying to entertain an audience and not just kind of have a laugh like banging like monkeys on typewriters, I think it really just started to gel.
And the orchestra's popularity is on the rise. Back in business after the pandemic, they're playing live at parties. The BTO is building their own brand and loving it.
It's always somewhat gratifying when we play out and see how much people enjoy what we do.
We discourage other orchestras from appearing. We don't need the competition, so. We have a team of players.
That's pretty cool. Let's get to some of your feedback before we head off. You're getting in touch about showers. And John says, why are people in Tauranga having 8-minute showers when 5 minutes is perfectly adequate? Well, John, it's not just the fine people of Tauranga who are having 8-minute showers. It's all of us. That is the average shower time in New Zealand, apparently. 8 minutes. Yep. Someone else says that they were in the UK. Camping grounds only allow 3 minutes for a shower. Then the money runs out. And the only way to have any water is to cross the room and put money into the machine, says Meg. So a nudie cold run. Yeah, not good. And Troy says, unless you are covered in mud, you should be able to scrub up in 2 minutes. Maybe we should put that to the test. On the issue of the cost of living payment, and there are tens of thousands of people who could miss out because IRD doesn't have their bank account details, and they are being encouraged to register those details with IRD. The preference is via the website. Well, a listener has got in touch to say, I just attempted to add my bank details via IRD website. Good luck. Worst website ever. Yeah, okay, good luck everybody. Now the Late News team is going to keep you updated throughout the evening. If you missed anything from the show, check us out on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcast from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up is speaking to the Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson, and we'll see what he makes of the report into TVNZ and Kamal Santamaria, which has led to the resignation of a top executive. Do tune in 5 a.m. first up, and we'll catch you tomorrow at the same time.
RNZ News Headlines. I'm Catriona McLeod. TVNZ Head of News and Current Affairs Paul Jurisic has resigned after a review into the hiring of presenter Kamal Santamaria. Tens of thousands of people could miss out on the government's initial cost of living bonus because Inland Revenue doesn't have their bank account details. Supplies of jib have been boosted, with 4 alternative plasterboard products now able to be used as a substitute. And some suburbs in Christchurch remain underwater tonight, with residents unable to leave home without flooding their cars. More in the news at 7.
I've got another bunch of coconut.